Imagine living through the same day, over and over again. You wake up in the morning, go to work, see the same people. Then something horrifying happens, and everything resets back to the beginning. At first, it might sound like a second chance. But what if that repetition happens dozens, or even hundreds of times? And slowly you begin to forget what's real, and what's just another nightmare. That's the exact vibe I got the moment the anime adaptation of All You Need Is Kill was finally revealed. And honestly, this was not what I expected. A lot of people probably thought this anime would basically become an animated version of Edge of Tomorrow. Cool armor, massive battles, explosive sci-fi action. But what we got instead feels much stranger, quieter, and way more psychological. And at the center of it all is Rita Vrataski. Not as the legendary soldier from previous versions, but as someone who looks like an ordinary person slowly losing her sanity inside a world that no longer makes sense. Hey everyone, welcome back to Sci-Fi Junkies.
Fly me to the moon. Let me play among the stars.
Before becoming an anime, All You Need Is Kill originally started as a light novel written by Hiroshi Sakurazaka back in 2004. The story later received a manga adaptation, illustrated by Takashi Obata, which helped the franchise gain even more popularity, thanks to its detailed and stylish artwork. Years later, Hollywood adapted it into Edge of Tomorrow, starring Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt. And now, the anime version has finally been announced by Warner Bros. Japan alongside Studio 4 Degrees Celsius. But the moment the teaser dropped, fans immediately became divided, because the art style feels completely different from the original manga. Instead of using the realistic and detailed visual approach from Takashi Obata, the anime leans more toward the experimental style seen in Tekken Concrete or Mind Game. And honestly, at first I was surprised too. Especially because Studio 4 Degrees Celsius was previously involved with projects related to Berserk, which visually feels much closer to the darker tone of All You Need Is Kill. So naturally, many longtime fans expected something more detailed, grounded, and visually intense. But the more I watched the teaser, the more I realized something. Maybe this anime is intentionally trying to feel uncomfortable, because this world no longer feels like a traditional war against aliens. It feels more like a biological nightmare slowly consuming humanity from the inside. Unlike the light novel, manga, or even Edge of Tomorrow, this new anime adaptation seems to reinterpret the world of All You Need Is Kill in a much stranger and more psychological way. The mimics still exist in this version, but instead of being presented as the sole central threat like previous adaptations, the anime introduces an entirely new mysterious entity known as Darol. And honestly, Darol feels less like an enemy and more like a living catastrophe. It appears as a massive biological structure embedded into the earth, almost like a giant alien flower, a tower, or some kind of organism humanity cannot fully understand. Unlike the mimics, which actively attack humans, Darol mostly remains motionless, but its presence alone creates outbreaks, strange creatures, and terrifying time anomalies around the surrounding area. And that changes the atmosphere of the story completely. This no longer feels like a straightforward war against alien invaders. It feels more like humanity living beneath the shadow of something ancient, incomprehensible, and slowly poisoning reality itself. And in the middle of that world, we follow Rita Vrataski. But unlike the original versions, Rita here is not introduced as a legendary soldier. She's simply a maintenance worker assigned to inspect and clean areas surrounding Darol while wearing protective gear that resembles industrial hazmat equipment rather than military armor. And honestly, I think that change makes Rita feel much more human, because she isn't some unstoppable action hero from the beginning. She's just an ordinary person trying to survive in a world that already feels broken. Then one day, Rita begins experiencing time loops. The same day repeats. The same incidents happen again and again. And the longer the cycle continues, the more the line between reality, trauma, and nightmare begins to collapse around her. 1. themes and message. First, trauma that never ends. The scariest thing about this anime, honestly, isn't Darol. It's the way the time loop slowly destroys Rita's mental state. Imagine reliving the same day over and over until everyone around you starts feeling like NPCs repeating the same dialogue forever. And from what we've seen so far, this anime seems much more focused on that loneliness compared to previous adaptations. Second, humans facing something beyond understanding. I really like how Darol doesn't feel like a traditional monster. It feels more like a natural disaster, or even some kind of alien god whose existence alone is enough to destroy the world. And humans here feel incredibly small. There's no heroic fantasy, no sense of being cool, just ordinary people trying to survive inside a world that's slowly becoming incomprehensible. Third, time loops as a symbol of trauma and routine. The time loop itself can also be interpreted as a metaphor for trauma or even modern routines slowly eroding a person's identity. Wake up, go to work, repeat the same thing, reset. And maybe that's why this anime feels so melancholic and emotionally heavy. 2. Visual style and animation. This is easily the most controversial part of the anime. Many longtime fans were disappointed because the visuals don't resemble the detailed and realistic style of Takashi Obata's manga artwork. And honestly, I understand why. Because the manga's military sci-fi aesthetic still looks incredible even today. Meanwhile, this anime uses a much rougher, surreal, and heavily experimental visual approach typical of Studio 4 degrees Celsius. But the more I watched the teaser, the more it felt like this style was specifically chosen to reflect Rita's mental state. The animation feels unstable. The backgrounds sometimes look dreamlike. And Rita's expressions feel like someone slowly losing touch with reality. And strangely enough, that's exactly what makes this adaptation stand out. Because the visuals themselves make you feel uncomfortable. 3. Production process. The anime is being produced by Studio 4 degrees Celsius, a studio well known for experimenting with visual storytelling. They've never really been the type of studio that follows mainstream anime trends. And you can clearly see that in projects like Tekken Kinkreet and Mind Game. Because of that, many people believe this adaptation will focus far more on psychological atmosphere than large-scale military action like the Hollywood version. And honestly, that's exactly why I'm interested in it. Because it feels like this anime wants to become something completely different instead of simply copying Edge of Tomorrow. 4. Differences between the light novel, manga, Edge of Tomorrow and the anime. First, light novel and manga. The original versions focus on a military war against alien creatures known as mimics. Rita is portrayed as a legendary soldier equipped with heavy combat armor and extraordinary fighting abilities. The tone leans heavily into military sci-fi mixed with psychological themes. Second, Edge of Tomorrow. This live-action movie changes many elements to better fit a Hollywood blockbuster format. The action becomes bigger and more explosive. And overall, the story focuses much more on entertainment and large-scale sci-fi action. Third, the new anime. Meanwhile, this anime feels more like a complete reinterpretation. The mimics still exist, but the anime introduces a new mysterious entity called Darol, a massive biological structure that completely changes the atmosphere of the world. Rita is no longer an elite soldier, but an ordinary maintenance worker. And the tone shifts towards psychological sci-fi horror with a much more surreal and experimental atmosphere. 5. Interesting facts. First, Studio 4 degrees Celsius often creates worlds that feel unreal. If you've watched Tekken Kinkreet or Mind Game, then you already know Studio 4 degrees Celsius loves creating visuals that feel dreamlike and unsettling. And now that same style is being brought into All You Need Is Kill. Second, fans are still divided about the visual direction. Even now, many longtime fans still wish the anime had stayed closer to the original manga's visual style. But at the same time, others are beginning to appreciate the surreal direction because it feels more unique and artistic. 6. Theories and symbolism. First, Darol might be more than just an alien. Darol feels less like a monster, and more like a symbol of disaster, trauma, or an existence humanity simply cannot fight through normal means. It stays motionless, yet slowly transforms the world around it into chaos. And honestly, that feels much scarier than a creature that simply attacks physically. Second, Rita is slowly losing her sense of reality. The longer Rita remains trapped inside the loop, the more the world around her starts feeling artificial. And maybe the anime's surreal visual style is actually showing us the world from Rita's perspective, a reality repeating itself so many times that it no longer feels real anymore. Personally, I think this anime adaptation of All You Need Is Kill has the potential to become something far stranger and far more personal than any previous version. Maybe this isn't the adaptation longtime fans originally wanted, but honestly, that's exactly what makes it interesting. Because instead of simply retelling the same story, this anime seems to be transforming it into a surreal psychological sci-fi experience that feels much more human. But that's just my opinion. What about you guys? Do you like the anime's new direction? Or would you have preferred something closer to Takashi Obata's original manga style? Let me know in the comments. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because on this channel, we'll continue exploring the strangest worlds in anime, cyberpunk, and sci-fi worlds that sometimes feel even more terrifying than the future itself. Thanks for watching till the end, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!